Glad everybody could take a moment out of their day to come and support small business in our community. We have a great presenter today. We have Miss Jen McCall and Devin Keeler with SeaTox Research. They're going to come and tell us a little bit about their business. So without further ado, ladies, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here, and I want to send a special thank you for everybody who turned on your camera, because it is very awkward to talk about your business and about anything when it's a bunch of names. So thank you for turning on and seeing everybody. It is nice to see you. I'm Jennifer McCall. I am the co-founder of SeaTox Research with my husband, who is off screen. He's here, but he's even worse. He doesn't even have his name up. He's off screen. And so we've got, we're very happy to be here and to talk to you about our company. We've got Devin Keeler, who is our research manager and is an integral part of our team, that's going to share her screen and start talking about our business whenever she is ready. So thank you.
Thanks, Jen. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for coming to listen to us chat this morning. Our company, SeaTox Research, is a biotech R&D company that specializes in assay development, which is really just kind of a fancy word for the test kits that we make. Kind of real life example of this sort of thing is if you think of a pregnancy test, which usually people are familiar with, that we use a similar type of technology to those tests. However, the ones that we create are designed to detect marine neurotoxins instead of hormones that show up when you're pregnant. So you may already be familiar with the type of harmful algal blooms that create these toxins. If you've ever heard of the red tide, which occurs down around the coast of Florida and in the Gulf Coast mostly, these toxins that we specialize in making these kits for are produced naturally by these algal blooms. These toxins can then accumulate in fish and shellfish, and they become dangerous when people consume too many or too much of these toxins. The symptoms that develop can range anywhere from an upset stomach to paralysis and death. So it kind of depends on which toxin and obviously how much was consumed. So our job as the company is to create rapid tests for these marine toxins. We try to err on the side of making them more user-friendly and able to be performed without very expensive equipment. And they also don't produce hazardous byproducts. So as you might imagine, there's kind of a fine line to be towed here where it's important to close areas of fishing and harvest. So in order to protect human health, so people aren't consuming these toxins in the shellfish that they eat. But you also have to consider that it's important to keep it more efficient also, so that the local commercial fishermen aren't losing money, but that people aren't getting sick at the same time. So this is where our technologies come in. Our kits are used to detect these toxins when they go above FDA established limits, which are usually about 10-fold lower than the lowest dose that might cause symptoms. So an overview of the technology that we are basing these kits off of. You are probably relatively familiar with the term antibody at this point in the current climate with COVID and everything. So using that as an example, that antibodies are by nature, they form to bind to a specific compound or protein. And so we are harnessing that technology in our antibody-based tests in that they will bind to a certain compound that we're trying to detect. So with these antibody-based tests, which are also called ELISAs, which you might see later in the presentation, they are detecting a competition between free toxin in the sample that you're testing compared to like a colored label of that same toxin. And so the more toxin that is present in the sample is going to create less color development. So it's an indirect test of how much is in the sample that you extracted. Then we also produce some receptor-based tests, which is sort of a similar concept, except that they use like a brain receptor preparation. So we know that these toxins bind to certain receptors in neural tissue. And so the receptor-based tests are a little bit more accurate of a reflection of actual toxicity, because these compounds produce their toxic effects by binding to this receptor. And then here again, it's competing against a fluorescently labeled toxin. So the more color development you have, the less toxin you have, which you can see represented in this graph down to the bottom right also, where with the lower concentrations, you get high fluorescent values, and with the higher concentrations, you get lower fluorescent values. So harmful algal blooms actually cost about 82 million per year in the US. And that also includes $38 million in losses to the fishing industry specifically. So our market comes in with food safety testing and the seafood market in general, both qualifying as billion-dollar industries. Our customers currently are mostly regulatory authorities, so the agencies that are in charge of opening and closing places to harvesting and fishing. And these can be state, federal, or international. We also sell to academic researchers who are just interested in how these toxins work. With global climate change, it's also increasing the frequency of harmful algal blooms and their severity as well. So considering this, we expect that this market will continue to expand if these trends that we see continue in the direction that they're going. As far as our competition goes, it's mostly from previously established kind of gold standard methods for testing for these toxins in samples. The first one is a mouse bioassay, which is a little, I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory in that they can test any type of toxic compound on an animal and see if it kills it. So obviously here it's less ideal because there's animal usage, which in our industry, people generally try to avoid. And this also requires the facilities for animal husbandry and IAPUC approvals, which are just very strict regulatory hoops that you kind of have to jump through in order to be able to do this kind of testing. And then the technicians who are also handling these animals require special training. Then liquid chromatography and liquid chromatography tandem with mass spectrometry, which those are used as a little bit more of a technical measurement of these toxins. That it's very high-tech equipment that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the training to be able to use this kind of equipment is also pretty specific and can be expensive. Then there are also some ELISA kits. So back to the antibody-based technology that I was talking about a couple slides ago. There are some commercially available kits for saxitoxin, domoic acid, and brevetoxin, all of which SeaTox also produces kits for. But they're, in addition, mostly from small companies, and a lot of them haven't been very well validated across different metrics. So the SeaTox kits have a couple of specific advantages that I want to touch on. That paralytic shellfish poisoning, the illness that is caused by saxitoxin. There are 40 different or over 40 different metabolites and analogs of saxitoxin. So it makes testing for this compound especially difficult. because the antibodies are designed to recognize specific areas of these compounds. And so obviously, if you have small changes, it might mean that the antibody doesn't detect those compounds as well. So the antibody solution that we put in our test kit that tests for saxitoxin is actually pretty unique in that it will detect 6 of the most toxic forms of saxitoxin, whereas our competitors typically only detect 1 or 2. And in addition, with regard to the receptor binding technology that I was speaking about, there's no commercially available rapid test for ciguatoxin specifically. There have been a couple that have come and gone from the market, but with validation and further study, most of them have been removed. And to wrap up, our business model is kind of unique in that we don't solely depend on kit sales. And we, in the past few years, have been partially dependent on federal and state support also. That Jen actually wrote a grant that received about $1.5 million. And that was actually, like, side note, what put me through grad school. And that we were able to do a lot of validation work on our the ciguatoxin assay that I was talking about, that there is minimal competition against. Then in addition to those, we also offer scientific consulting. So private, smaller companies that sometimes need assistance with either experimental planning or execution, or they just need a piece of equipment that we happen to have. And so we do some collaborations that way as well. And that kind of wraps it up for that. So we have these different buckets that we kind of jump around between, which I don't think is normal for companies in the biotech industry. And with that, I'd like to thank you guys again for your attention and open it up to any questions you guys have.
So Devin, I want to kind of start it because there might be some people like me who are not much into science. If
Okay.
you're going to present to an audience of people that had no science background, in a nutshell, what would you say your business does?
We produce kits for testing for compounds in shellfish that make people sick.
Okay, because I think one of the things that would help you in your presentation is, depending on your audience, is to know who your, what kind of audience you have and kind of tailor that, because you kind of lost me in the science of this, which I'm impressed, but I really didn't understand because I'm not a science background, I'm a business person. So that would be one suggestion I have, is when you do your presentations, know your audience. But I think what you're doing is outstanding, because a lot of people do get very sick from certain types of seafood and things in the environment. So I applaud you for that. I just wanted it in plain English. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your feedback, Cindy.
Hey, Devin. I thought your presentation was great. I was wondering, I saw some of the things that you pair with other companies or who you supply those to, but is there any collaboration with like the NC Wildlife, where people get their fishing license for freshwater and saltwater? There's shellfish like down in Louisiana, just talking about crawdads, crawfish, things like that. Is there any collaboration with them?
We mostly collaborate with NOAA, that they're one of our biggest, that we work most closely with them. And they were a group that also worked on the development of our brevetoxin and ciguatoxin FDA.
Devin, can you go back to the map where the HABs are?
Yeah.
So we don't actually have that many, at least that we detect for, in North Carolina. There are some in North Carolina, but most of the ones that we detect for, where our customers are and where our collaborations are in Florida, the Caribbean, Pacific Island nations, and a lot in the Pacific Northwest. And that's where we're finding a lot of connections for collaborations.
I got a question.
So I just have a question about how the testing works. Are you actually testing the shellfish, or are you testing the waters that the shellfish reside in?
Mhm.
So it kind of depends. They're targeted towards being able to use on shellfish samples, but they can also be used on water samples. It's just that because the level of toxin in the water is going to be a lot lower than it would potentially be in shellfish, that it requires a way to condense the water, whether you're evaporating it off or those kind of methods where you would effectively be concentrating the toxins that were present.
So a simple answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Are the test kits recyclable?
No. No, the components, once you use them, they're used up.
Okay.
Can I piggyback off that and ask if that has to have certain medical disposal?
No medical disposal. No. The toxin levels that were included in the kit are at a low enough level that it doesn't harm, because the kits are so sensitive that you don't have, and there's no biomedical waste.
Mhm.
Do you ladies consume seafood? Will you eat shellfish?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Shellfish.
Okay.
Call me naive or foolish, maybe.
Yeah, right. Just
Like
kind of
it.
block it out sometimes.
Yeah, one of the things that we're interested in is getting greater accessibility to seafood, because seafood is it's a very healthy protein. There's a lot of people that are getting more and more eating more and more shellfish and seafood, and so making sure that we are having informed decisions about how we eat the shellfish and the seafood, whether it's here in the United States or abroad, where people have to eat. That's part of their diet, their cultural diet, or that's the protein that they have, is just making sure that people are informed about what they're eating and to better protect their health.
And so today we see a lot of farm raised seafood. Will this detect the toxins in the farm raised? Are they using that in farm raised seafood or shellfish?
They can. So it just depends on where the harmful algal blooms occur. So they're naturally occurring blooms. They're kind of like hurricanes. They expand, they bloom, and then they go away. And so when you have the expansion, you know it's coming. And so the regulatory agencies, they're constantly screening the shellfish to make sure that once it gets to that level, they'll close the beds and say, we don't eat any more of the food. And it's a commercial product. So commercially, you can't harvest the shellfish and put it on the market. That doesn't mean that people still don't do it, like for private consumption. And so that's where it gets a little bit of a gray area for whether we want to make sure that people, if they're going to harvest it anyway, have that informed decision. But then once the bloom goes back down, so regulatory agencies, state or federal, they're constantly screening it. And once it goes down, then they can reopen the bed for commercial harvesting.
Jen, if I might add something really quick.
Go ahead.
So something I think didn't touch on enough in this presentation is that a lot of the methods that are used apart from our rapid tests can take days to sometimes even a week or so to get results from, if they have to do the extraction and then ship out the sample to be tested by one of those other methods that I was talking about. So in order to facilitate this being a more efficient process and decreasing losses from this, that's an important factor to consider also.
And where do you ladies see SeaTox Research going in the future? What do you plan to expand to other tests?
Kevin, you want that one or you want me to?
I'm gonna let you handle that one.
All right. So yes, we are, I mean, we're scientists at heart. We get really excited about science, and we do want to develop more test kits for other toxins, and that's in the pipeline. We also collaborate with a lot of manufacturers. So we do the test kit components. We're kind of biochemists, toxin biologists, but we also collaborate with people that make fancier, what do you call it? Lab in a box. So it's like a fancy box that glows blue or green, whether something is toxic or not. And so we're collaborating with people to make more efficient tests, more rapid, more easy to use tests. We've got some collaborators that are working on an on the boat test, so that they can actually take the components. The fishermen can pull their harvest, they can quickly screen it, see if it's toxic, they know whether to harvest that or not, even if it's not the official test that they still have to send off for. So it's, again, having that rapid response. That's something that we're interested in, is making sure we have a rapid response. We're also, something that SeaTox is very interested in is fostering our local biotech community. And local, it obviously extends out to Fayetteville as well, just our southeast area. So fostering and mentoring other small businesses that are looking to get into this arena, because it has been a bit of a bumpy road for us. It's been difficult to get going, to get the equipment, to get our business plans, because we're scientists. Business is a little alien for us. And so we want to mentor, and we want to facilitate other entrepreneurs in this area. And that's something that's kind of not part of our business plan, but it's something that we would like to see grow.
Ladies, I have a question, and I apologize if it's already been asked because I got called away for a moment. About approximately how much does your kit sell for? Or the fee to use it?
So it depends on the platform. I think we have like $249 to $399 are a test kit that will test up to 40 samples in duplicate.
Do you have anything, or do you envision having something maybe on a lower price point, smaller scale, where maybe a restaurant that really specializes in seafood can do some random testing? Because if the customer gets sick, they're not going to go and say, well, which fisherman did you get it from? So let's boycott this fisherman. They're going to say, what restaurant did you eat at?
Right.
So do you have something on a smaller scale, or a lower price point that a restaurant could use to do some random sampling?
This is something that we're working on, and part of that is in collaboration with some of the people who are doing like the on the boat test. Could also be used like in a restaurant test, I guess you could call it. We always just think of it as an on the boat test, but it's something like a dipstick, or like that pregnancy test that's just a one-off that Devin was talking about. It's something that we would like to see moving forward, that we're working on. Usually our current test kits, Devin, I don't know if you can slide back to the slide where it shows the picture of it. It goes in like a 96 well plate. And so it's meant to be used in a lab right there. So it's meant to be used in a lab. You have to have general lab supplies to do it. But this evolution of testing to be more user-friendly is something that we would like to see go either what we're working on, or what we're working on with collaborators that do this kind of micro testing, putting a test into a micro format.
And as a consumer of shellfish, sometimes businesses do unethical things. I would love to see something that maybe you could purchase to test your own seafood if you went to a restaurant, just to make sure that it didn't have any of these toxins. Because I have to say, I think I may consider the next time I decide to eat those shrimp. I had no idea. I mean, I'm aware of food poisoning and that sort of thing, but I wasn't aware of that could occur because you consumed seafood or shellfish that was contaminated with the toxin. So I would love to see it availability just to the consumer, the end consumer of the shellfish.
Like the COVID at home tests.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's your shrimp is probably okay. So it's mostly going to be in like oysters, or so you look at where your oysters are harvested from, and that's why they have the whole, what is it, month with an R thing. And there's different times of the year where the blooms occur. And so you can watch and see, like when you have a really long season, a long HAB season, you wouldn't want to necessarily eat oysters from Massachusetts during that time, or where your oysters are from. Your North Carolina oysters are probably going to be okay because we don't have a lot of the ones that contaminate and make you sick here. So it's a sourcing thing. Locally sourced stuff, farm raised stuff is better. It's making those connections. At least that's what I tell myself when I order oysters, because I still like
So
oysters.
you do eat oysters?
I do. I do. I don't in the summer, and I like to
No.
eat North Carolina ones. So
Okay, okay.
yeah. Cold water. Cold water is good.
Okay,
Warm water is bad. Cold water is good.
okay, thank you.
Well, along the same line, the consumer and the restaurants, I would also consider, the businesses that sell seafood. You find not only at the beach, but in different areas where they sell seafood. Where you can purchase and then go home and cook it yourself, because that's their business, and it's hard once you get somebody saying, "I got your seafood and I got sick." It's hard to beat that reputation. Then it takes a moment to destroy a reputation, takes a long time to build one back up. So I could see places like that, or large catering venues that would appreciate something that they could use on a smaller scale, quick test kind of thing. So I think you're onto something here, because nobody wants to get sick from this. And I think if you could scale it down to something I could do, like Lori was talking about, either a consumer or a restaurant or a grocery store, a catering place, or a seafood house. I mean, I could see the uses are just out there.
Yeah.
So, but it kind of sounds like from one of your last answers that you were encouraging other entrepreneurs to develop something. So it sounds like you're more on the research side than the actual business, I want to make some money side. Is that accurate?
No, no, we do both. I want to encourage other entrepreneurs in biotech in general. We want to foster. We really believe that the whole rising tide lifts all boats, that if we can build a community where you're doing different things, it's specialization. I'm really good at this and you're really good at this, and we put these two pieces together and we can really make a product. Our customers are primarily researchers and regulatory authorities, because those are the ones that are required, or are, I guess required by law is probably a good word, to close down the beds. And so then the whole supply chain follows from that, is that the beds are closed. It shouldn't get into the fish market, shouldn't get into the restaurant, et cetera, et cetera. And there are a lot of things that will make you sick. That's not, whether it's in fish or in other meat, that is not necessarily directly related to harmful algal blooms. So.
Okay, I grew up in South Florida. As a teenager, we used to go out to the inlets and do some shrimping with our flashlights and buckets, and we never thought about any of this. And so the question I guess I have to ask, because you're out of my realm here, because I'm not even sure what your market is. That you just responded that said that you're actually called to action. So I guess your market is your efforts are reactive and not proactive. Is that correct?
Define
reactive in that your business comes from people that call on you rather than you calling on them.
No.
Okay, because you said that regulatory agencies are your main source of business.
Yeah.
I would assume they call you, you don't call them. Is that correct? Or do you contact them to?
I'm not understanding your question.
Who's your customer?
Regulatory agencies.
That's what I asked. Okay, so in assuming that regulatory agencies are your customer, do they call you, or do you call the various regulatory agencies and let them know of your existence and how you can help them?
I'm gonna let Sam, he's itching to answer this one.
I'll answer this question. I do more of the business for SeaTox. So
regulatory
agencies are required to periodically monitor the fisheries. So they're doing testing all the time, and they need more test methodologies that are either rapid or more cost effective, so that they can do more samples in less time. And that's where our kit comes in. So they can test up to 40 samples. They can go out in a day and take samples, get 40 samples, come back to the lab, test it, and within an hour or two have results. Whereas before they'd have to send out 40 samples at a great expense and wait a week to get those results back. So our test kits allow them to almost real-time monitor a fishery, not only to determine when they want to close the fishery, but it also allows them to do that cost-effective monitoring as the algal bloom subsides so that they can reopen the fishery efficiently and get all the fishermen back into business. Furthermore, because they are required to regularly monitor the fishery, they need to have our test kits on hand. So there's really both a push and a pull strategy for marketing our test kits, where we find these regulatory or research institutes that do all the testing. We sell or push our test kits to them and talk about all those features and benefits to allow for more closely and more economically monitoring. And as our customer base grows, other customers, other regulatory agencies see our test kits in use and the ability to efficiently monitor, and they pull our products further into the market.
So I guess the question then is, when we talk about the markets, a lot of the suggestions that are coming out this morning are suggestions about you going commercial to actually the restaurants. And is this something you even have an interest in, or have you even dipped your toes in the water on this? And again, why would a commercial fisherman ever want to get your test? Because that just hurts his business.
Sure. So you've got to look at how technology develops. And I'll go back to kind of the pregnancy test, where once upon a time you had to go to a doctor's office to get a pregnancy test. Now you can run down to the CVS and pick one up. So there's that development of technology where you come up with a disruptor of the market and you enter the market with that. And then as the technology evolves and is refined, it allows for it to be micronized and provided to the customer. But you kind of have to enter the market and see where the pitfalls are. So you start with an expert in the testing, and then it evolves. So we absolutely have those visions in place, but we had to enter the market with our products and start to develop how they're used and understand where they could move into.
So do you have an international market in mind as well then?
So I have an answer too to why would a fisherman, you asked a question about why would a fisherman want to test their stuff. And it's a valid question, because you would think if they test it and they found out it's toxic, they don't get money. But the problem is, if they don't test it and they harvest all, let's say they have like 100 oysters they can harvest now, they can harvest in a week. If they harvest it all now and they take it to the distributor, and the distributor then has to test it, if it's toxic, all that gets thrown away. If the fisherman knows it's toxic, they're not going to harvest it, and they can just wait. And when they wait, the harmful algal bloom goes away, the oysters depurate the toxins, and then they're clean. So that's the point where we're trying to get the on the boat test, is better informing the fishermen so they know whether or not to harvest their product.
So do other government agencies outside of the United States, do they have regulatory requirements on their fishing stuff? And have you pursued that as well?
Yes.
So you've mentioned there are other processes for this. How much competition do you really have? And does anybody have something as rapid as yours?
There are similar platforms and there are no competition. It just depends on what the toxin is. Because, Devin, can you go back to that slide?
Yep.
There are standard approved methods, but the problem is that they take days. And so if a fisherman takes the oysters, harvests the oysters, or takes a sample, I'll go back, take a sample, send it off. 2 days later, it says, okay, that was clear. He or she, I shouldn't be pejorative about that, right? He or she could harvest their product. And in those 2 days, you could have a bloom. And now that harvest is toxic. So the problem is the competition takes too long. So even though it's an approved technology and that we are not yet approved, that responsiveness is just not adequate for environmental conditions. So there are some ELISA kits that are similar to ours, but again, not really on the boat. And that's what we're working on developing. And as Devin talked about, there are 40 different versions of some of these toxins that an ELISA can say, yes, this is here, or no, it's not. It's worse when it's no, it's not here. You're clean. You harvest your product. oh, wait, there was one that your ELISA didn't detect, and that's where ours detects. So it's being used. What we're seeing is our customers are using our test kits in addition to the competition, the standard assays, because it allows them to be more responsive.
And do you have a patent or patent pending?
We have, it's very difficult to patent antibodies because they are naturally produced things. We have, it's kind of like a trade secret because we have this version and we don't talk about how we have this version, and then nobody else really has that version.
So there's nothing on the kit that's unique that you could patent? Because I'm thinking you got a gold mine here that you could really, because especially the way you described it about how if I'm on the fisherman on the boat, I can test then and there and know if now's the time to harvest or wait, not lose. I mean, I see great potential here.
Yeah. So if you want to, it's very difficult to develop an antibody. And that's the way. It's really technical, not trying to get too far back into the technicals on how that works. Anybody could try it, but it's kind of like winning the lottery. So we won the lottery. We have an antibody that works really well. Anybody else is welcome to try, but it costs a lot of money and a lot of effort, and you may not get anything. So that's why it's kind of like a trade secret.
But you could potentially save fishermen and fish hatcheries a ton of money of knowing when to harvest and when not to.
Mm-hmm. That's the point of our business.
So I'm thinking, you know, if you got something, especially something that's rapid and everybody else is taking a long time to test, like you said, there's a big difference between the day you sample it and the day you get the results back, and you could lose a lot of money in the harvesting, shipping, and all of that in the meantime. It only turn out that it's toxic.
Was there a question in that?
No, just
Okay.
I'm amazed. I mean, that you've got this, and I just could see so much potential here, so much, especially if you can get something that's a little bit more user friendly to a lot of other people.
Yep.
You've got a lot of potential here. Sorry, I'm seeing cha-ching, cha-ching in my eyes.
Right. Yeah. I just want to make sure because we got this awkward, like quiet. I'm like, was there a question I missed?
I mean, I didn't understand a lot of the science when you were first talking about it. Now I understand what you're doing. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, you've got such potential here. And if you can develop this, you know, even further into the user market, oh my gosh, you've got, it's just amazing that you could, because I've never heard a good story about somebody who got sick from shellfish. Never.
Yeah. Some of them are worse than others. Some of them just, I mean, like the best case scenario, you vomit and diarrhea. That's still not pleasant, but some of them can cause paralysis and death in severe cases without hospitalization. So it's, you know, it's not fun.
Hey, Jennifer,
Yes,
excellent presentation because I love seafood.
me too.
Believe me, tremendously amount. But let me ask you this question.
Mhm.
What are your challenges with this program?
That's a good question. We have technological challenges in
Mhm.
that there is some specialization in what we do. And so finding the right pathway to getting it on the boat that we'd been talking about, finding good collaborators that specialize in what they do. So the platform for what a pregnancy test type kit would look like is different than our technological expertise. Funding is a big one because all of this is very expensive.
Yeah.
Sam likes to say, I sneezed and lost $10,000 in research. It's just really expensive when you get into the scale of how to get there. And I think, what else would you say is a good challenge?
Conversion of business, because
Business conversion, yeah.
the methodology.
Here's Sam.
Here. So I'll add to it. So probably another big hurdle is the conversion of methodologies. And Devin had talked about, you know, like mouse bioassays or radiological assays. There are testing methodologies that are ingrained in certain research and regulatory institutes. It's what they've done for a while. It's what their protocols are based on. And so because we're disrupting that, there's a time period of saying to them, all right, use our test. It works better. It's faster. They say, but we're used to doing this. We don't mind waiting a week. It's what we know. So there is some of that market penetration conversion that's required. But we've got such good features and benefits that if we can get kind of that groundswell of people converting to us, we see significant upside to it.
Okay. So how are you going to encourage these folks to convert to you?
Certainly through the use of publications. That's one of the good things about being academics ourselves, is that we can produce data ourselves and publish those papers that show the features and benefits. And then as we grow business, it forms that groundswell, because these communities are so interconnected as far as regulatory goes, that if Washington State, for example, sees that Oregon's shutting down their fisheries because of some harmful algal bloom, Washington will start to look for it. And if they see that Oregon is using our test kit and they can close it very rapidly and they can open it very rapidly, then they want to use that technology. So it's converting the initial business and then getting the name out there and publishing data, those kind of things.
So your technology is an advanced piece of technology on an already existing test kit.
It's using an established platform, but
Okay.
it's novel in that this particular platform has not been used for these endeavors. So we have developed new reagents, new antibodies that go into this platform that allow it to be used for these endeavors.
Okay. Have you reached out to the great state of Alaska?
We have. We sell to Alaska, we sell to Washington State, we sell to Oregon. We've got business, of course, in Florida and Alabama. We sell internationally to Monaco, to several countries in the Pacific Northwest. So anywhere that there are those algal blooms, we've reached out, and we've had quite a few customers then come to us after they've seen our success with other users.
Okay. Thanks for the answers.
Yeah,
great.
Absolutely.
Back to me.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hey.
Hi. I had a question about your funding. On one of your slides, I saw that you received funding through grants. So I wanted to know, how did you go about writing the grant?
Blood, sweat, and tears. Short answer for that one. And Devin has definitely been in lockstep with me on several of these. The first grant we got was an STTR, so it's part of the SBIR program through the NIEHS, because Environmental Health Sciences is very interested in these toxins and contamination of the seafood supply and the public health concern that's associated with this. So that was our first route. We also got some through NOAA. Again, very interested in the harmful algal blooms and the toxin chain up and down, not necessarily just for seafood supply, but also for environmental tracking and different types of algae that produce these different types of toxins and monitoring all of that. And then we've also got, there's this amazing program through the North Carolina Department of Commerce that has a matching. If you have an SBIR, you get a phase 1 SBIR grant, they will match a certain percentage of that. That has greater flexibility in being able to chase down project goals. So I can do all of this that's written in my SBIR grant, and then I can do these other project things to really just help the commercialization potential of your technology. And that's been our primary funding mechanisms through grants.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question for you too. Because your test kits are mostly focused on the results from the algae blooms, right?
Yes, toxins produced by harmful algae.
So is anyone tracking the blooms to try to determine, okay, well, this area is going to need to test more frequently for them, so that they kind of like hurricanes, you kind of know that they're coming?
Yes.
So someone is doing that already?
There's a lot of research looking at, so these are kind of outside of our realm. Our realm is really that toxin testing piece. So there are groups looking at toxins. They're also monitoring the algae themselves. So you can just you have these like little bots that you put in the water, and it constantly scans the water and looks for algae. And when it finds the harmful algae, it like, ticks, okay, we've got 1 algae per whatever amount of water going through. And when they start seeing the algae increase, they know a bloom is coming. There are groups that are looking at ways to disperse the algae and disperse the toxins to actually try to help once a harmful algal bloom is here, some kind of remediation type thing rather than just screening and closing and opening. There's lots of different groups with different technologies looking at ways that we can mitigate damages. Unfortunately, harmful, just like hurricanes, harmful algal blooms, they are natural occurrences. They are increasing. It's something that we have to learn to live with and deal with and mitigate as best as possible.
It would be helpful if your company were following some of that research, even though you're not doing it yourself, so that you'd know to increase production of those kits if necessary.
Yep. I'm in a lot of HAB groups for that kind of stuff.
Do we have any more questions? If not, I'm going to take the last question, Jen. What can this community do for you? How can we help?
It's a good question. I think, and Sam, please pipe in as you think of things. Support is really important. Knowing if you hear of connections, like funneling them. Devin, if you go back to our thank you slide, we have our website up in our just generic email inbox. If anybody has, if you hear of things and connections, information, ways that, hey, just like Athena was saying, like, you need to keep up with this group and you need to keep up with this group. Like, there's only 3 of us. So if you guys hear of things that I just saw that this bloom is coming up, or this is really important, funneling that information to us would be really helpful. We're really trying to get our network established for collaborations and support as we are growing, and we are trying to expand our company and expand our toxin portfolio, toxin test kit portfolio. So anything? Oh, he said I did a good job. So.
Jen, if I might add a little bit to that. Also, I think connections with other new biotech companies, like I'm not sure how common it is that you have people like us kind of come through speaking with you guys and all that kind of thing, that if there are other companies that are requiring kind of that like baseline development of data that they need either to apply for other grant funding or sort of like the beginning preliminary work, that we can help with also.
Well, ladies and Steve, thanks so much for the fantastic presentation today. We really, really enjoyed it. We would love to invite you back in the future. And I would love to see one of those kits that I could purchase at CVS for use on the oysters that I may decide to consume. However, after this presentation, I'm not quite sure I'm ready for an oyster just yet. So great business, ladies. I'll be in touch. If there's anything that we can do, please, you have my information. Again, fantastic presentation. Thanks for coming today. We really, really enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out to come and support SeaTox today. I hope to see you back next Wednesday. We have Pinnacle Elite that will come and tell us a little bit about their business. So I hope to see you then. You ladies and everybody, y'all have a fantastic day. See you next week.
Thank you guys for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for coming, and you really educated me today. And I'm not a science guru, but I appreciate the fact that in all the questions and answers, you were able to communicate to me exactly what you do. So good job on that. And I think you have a tremendous potential out there. I really do.
And I totally agree. And so have you ladies reached out to like the small business centers for some of the free seminars for grant writing and those sort of things?
Yes, but probably not as much as we could. That is something that we could do better. finding time can be a little
Right.
juggling everything.
I could see where that would, but I would strongly encourage you guys to, I mean, everything right now is through Zoom. We have a great small business center here that does a lot of the grant writing things. You ladies reach out. Athena could help you with that. If not, feel free to reach out to me. I can get Athena to send you guys a link for some of the up and coming presentations that we may have and some of the services that are offered. So I would definitely encourage you ladies to do that. I'm with Dean Burns. I see so much potential. And glad you ladies came today. Really enjoyed it. And Steve, appreciate it.
He's here. Thank you very much. No, that would be very helpful to have that, because a lot of times what we only get like the Wilmington things, and it's just not the right time. I can't do it right now. So just having more networking and more opportunities would be wonderful. I appreciate that.
Yep. So Athena, some of the webinars are on demand, correct?
There's a couple as they come through, but a lot of them are live.
Are live.
But you're not limited to just your Wilmington area. You can check out any of the ones across the state, because there's so many webinars right now that you should take advantage of whichever ones you have time for. I did post in the chat the link to all of the nonprofit series, because that's where you're going to find most of your grant webinars.
Great.
So just look and see if it says in person or online, and you're set to go.
Awesome. Thanks.
And I would think the grant writing would definitely be advantageous to you ladies. Yeah. So I would definitely utilize that.
Thank you.
And if you're going after a very large grant, like in the millions, you might want to contract with someone to assist you with that, who's a professional at that, because you don't want to take the opportunity to lose millions of dollars.
Right.
Having been involved in some of that grant writing, not my favorite thing to do. So sometimes it's good to bring in somebody who knows how to write them to get those dollars for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely something that more eyes is better on the writing from our experience. Lots of rounds of edits.
Yes, and if it's in their wheelhouse, they'll know what to look for, and all the little I's to dot and the T's to cross. So.
But thank you for coming to present. I mean, I've really learned a lot. I'm not a big seafood person, but I know a lot of people who are, and I just have heard the horror stories, which is another reason why I stay away from it. But I learned a lot more today, so I appreciate that.
So I had no idea. So I was, it was very enlightening for me. I mean, obviously I knew that, a lot of people like raw oysters and stuff. I don't. But I do like oysters. I like shellfish, and I knew that they would make you sick. And I guess maybe I thought that they could be life-threatening. I think I'll consider the next oyster.
I think one of the biggest learning points for me was when you described how if you harvest it now, it could be toxic, but if you leave it and you wait, that it can self-correct. And I had no idea that it could do that.
That's the hardest decision, pain point for the fishermen, is deciding when the lag time is so long for the official mechanisms of testing. Do I harvest? Do I not? Do I take the risk? Do I wait? Having more responsive information is, as a whole, something that needs to be fixed. And if we can help with one piece of that, that would be a good thing.
And it is hard when people are used to, well, I've always used this test and they have always been reliable, and to get them to try new things. But I think when you educate them, especially when you hit the business part of it, of you could go ahead and harvest it now, but it comes back toxic, you've lost it all. Not only your time, your effort, but the money of shipping it to wherever it's going and all of that. That speaks to their bottom line dollars. And for some of these places, they don't have a lot of profit margin to start with. So if they can avoid even some of those losses, it makes a big difference for them.
Yeah. We also find that our kits, and we didn't necessarily mention this, they're really useful for reopening. that they have lots of monitoring systems, like the thing in the water that I was talking about, to say, okay, time to close, this is dangerous. But then you've got fishermen that are just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. And okay, is it clear now? Is it clear now? And just having that responsiveness to say, yes, this is clear. Let's go ahead and reopen so that we can get back to work, is one thing that our customers are finding these types of platforms very useful for.
Yeah, I think one of your biggest obstacles that's going to make a huge difference for your company is just the education piece of what your test will do, how it can help you time-wise and money-wise. It's just, I mean, the potential there, that's why I've said, you know, once people realize how much time and effort it can save them and how much losses it could prevent, I think it's going to be a done deal. It's just the education piece for people who are used to the way it's always been.
Yep. Or the big guys that make the certain tests. And that COVID did kind of hamper us a bit because we couldn't go to conferences. We couldn't go, I mean, we could do the data, we could do the publications, and that's how a lot of our customers and our current collaborators who would have been competitors, but it's a lot easier for them to get our supplies rather than make their own, found us. But conferences and getting, especially the harmful algal bloom conferences, getting out there to get people who want to try our products, who want to run the data, who want to publish with us, to get that information out has been a bit, it's put us a little behind. But hopefully now that things are clearing, we all hope, right? We'll be able to get back out there and do that more.
Well, I wish you a lot of success, because I think you're doing a great thing out there. There's a lot of people who live and die by, you know, the seasons of fishing and harvesting, and I think you could really help them a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate your feedback and your mentorship with our our talk.
Now on to the next 1 million cups.
Yep.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much.
We'll be in touch.